I may start off configuring my ACI network in network-centric mode, where I take VLAN 10 and VLAN 20 and VLAN 30 and I bring them on to my ACI network. But over time, I may decide that I want to apply more security or more visibility to my network. And in this case, it's very easy to do. I can do that by segmenting my applications. There are various ways that I can do that. For instance, in this case, you can see that I'm taking a single subnet and I am grouping the devices in that subnet into different applications. This always brings me back to what I used to do when I was a network administrator, and I would say my server VLAN is VLAN 10, and all my servers go in that VLAN. So if I'm a network administrator, and I've got all my servers in VLAN 10, but now I want to take advantage of ACI by applying some more security, for instance, to my application 1, application 2, and application 3, I can bring that subnet into ACI, and then I can take those devices and those applications and put them into different groups. So for instance, app 1 all the way to the left may be a web application that I have. App 2 may be terminal servers that I have in my environment, whereas app 3 may be my Citrix VDI clients. So I can take VLAN 10 and I can take all my web servers and put them in a group called app 1. I take all my terminal servers, I put them in a group called app 2. I take all my VDI servers, I put them in a group called app 3. I haven't changed any of the IP addressing. They still belong to that subnet, and they're able to get to their default gateway because that's associated with the bridge domain. And now I can apply contracts between those devices and the users in my network through my layer 3 out to control who has access to which applications over what ports. So for instance, app 1 is only allowing web services from end users into that application. App 2 is only allowing RDP traffic, and app 3 is only allowing Citrix VDI traffic. Now the best part about this is all my servers inside of that group can all talk to each other freely by default. I can make it so they're not allowed to talk to each other, but in this case I don't want to. I don't really understand all the dependencies between all of my web servers. So I want them to be allowed to talk to each other. I don't want to break anything, but I do want to apply some extra security to make sure that my end users are only talking to the web server over port 80. So I can define a contract that allows me to do that and then use the fabric as a layer 4 firewall to enforce that contract. The other awesome thing is that once I do that, I am now tracking the health of those individual applications. So I can see the health of my web servers, I can see the health of my terminal servers, and I can see the health of my VDI clients. And I know that if my VDI clients are at 80% or my web servers are at 90% health, I want to go take a look at them and see what's going on with that specific application. Application segmentation doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be granular, but we can make it more granular if we want to. But we can also start off very simple, and we can do a crawl, walk, run scenario moving from network-centric mode to basic app segmentation into more advanced application segmentation, such as what we see here, or what we commonly call micro-segmentation. This is where I take an individual application and I start breaking it up into individual tiers. So we talked previously about a web tier and an app tier and a database tier. I can control on a hop-by-hop basis how devices are allowed to talk to other devices, what quality of service they use in order to do that, as well as the fact that now that I've broken this up by web, app, and database, I can actually see more in depth into that individual application where I can see the difference between whether my web servers are performing well versus my database servers. And it doesn't matter if they're virtual or physical devices. It doesn't matter if they're Microsoft servers or VMware servers or OpenStack servers. I can take that same policy and I can apply it across the board. And I can build security in along every hop. And this is what we typically call an application profile. The last piece of the puzzle and the final thing that we can control with our contracts is that I can actually say, once again, on a hop-by-hop basis, which layer 4 through 7 services that I want that traffic to go through. So if I want folks coming from the outside on the right talking to the web server to go through a load balancer and a firewall, it's as simple as checking a box or dragging and dropping with ACI. I can even make it automatic to the point where I can configure the firewall and tell it what VLANs to use, tell it what interfaces to use, put the configuration on the firewall, and then I can monitor that configuration to make sure it stays the way it should. And when I'm done using it and I delete that contract or delete that application, the controller will actually log back into the firewall and remove that configuration and give the resources back. I can also monitor the health of the packets going in and out of that firewall. This is way different than what we do today. Today we have to do all kinds of rocket science to get the packets where we want to go. We got to hairpin them across the network. We got to stitch VRFs. We got to stitch VLANs. We got to use policy-based routing. We got to do all this stuff to get the traffic where we want to go. With ACI, I can control that on a hop-by-hop basis. I can automate it for you. I can track the health of it, and I can create a better network. Now that we've talked about deploying ACI in an application-centric mode, let's see what that looks like on the actual console. Here I'm going to go ahead and log into ACI once again with admin and in my basic mode. When I log in, I'm going to be at my Fabric tab. I'm going to move over to my tenant tab, and in a previous lesson we had already created our CCNA data center tenant. So I'm going to double click inside that tenant. I already have my VRF created because it was created when I created that tenant. And the first thing I'm going to do is create a new bridge domain. I'm going to create this bridge domain much like it would have been in my previous role as a network administrator, where I have all my servers in the same subnet. So that might be VLAN 10 on my traditional network, but all of my servers are basically in the same subnet. So I'm going to grab this bridge domain, I'm going to drag it down here, I'm going to associate it with my VRF, and I'm going to give it a name. I could name this VLAN 10 if I wanted to. I'm actually going to name this server VLAN. And then I'm going to create a default gateway for that VLAN. I'm going to make sure my unicast routing is enabled. I'm going to click plus here, and I'm going to say that it's 172.16.10.1, and it's a /24. I'm going to press OK again to accept that configuration, and then down on the bottom right hand side I'm going to press submit. Now I can create my application profiles a couple different ways. I can click on application profiles, and I could actually create a single profile if I wanted to monitor all my applications together. I could create a single application profile that encompassed multiple applications, or I can go ahead and create a profile on an application by application basis. So in this case, I'm going to create an application called Exchange Servers. I'm going to right click on this, I create application. I'm going to call it Exchange Servers. I'm going to say OK. I'm then going to highlight that application. And now I'm going to actually start creating the policy around how that application should be able to talk to my other devices on the network. In this case, I'm going to make it very simple. I just want to track all of my Exchange servers. I don't really care to break them up into multiple tiers. So I'm just going to grab a group here, I'm going to drag it down here, and I'm just going to call it Exchange Servers. I'm going to associate it with my server VLAN because all my servers are in my server VLAN, and I'm going to press OK. Now because I'm not using intra EPG isolation, all of my servers can talk to all of my other servers inside that group. If I did have a group of servers that I didn't want to talk to each other, even though they were in the same group, I would change this to enforced. I'm going to press OK. Next, I want to control how devices from the outside of my fabric can communicate with my Exchange server. In this case, I would have had to have done some type of a pre-configuration for a layer 3 out. But I'm just going to show you what that might look like. So for instance, I can take my layer 3 connection, drag it down here, let it go. I choose the layer 3 connection going out of the network. I say OK. And now I can use a contract to say that folks coming from the outside should only be allowed to talk to my Exchange servers over port 25. So I'm going to create a contract that says Exchange outside communication. I'm going to uncheck no filter. And I'm actually going to create a filter that says you can only talk to Exchange over port 25. So that would be the IP ether type, TCP protocol, and I want to allow SMTP. I say update, OK, submit. So now what I've done is I'm going to put all my Exchange servers in this group. All the Exchange servers can talk to each other because they're within the same group, but people coming from the outside can only talk to my Exchange servers over port 25 or the SMTP port. So that's one way I could segment my application. The other thing I may want to do is break my application up into tiers, and once again, that's very easy to do. So for instance, I can create a new application profile, and I'll just call it Web Application. And in this application, I can do the same thing that we've seen in the example, where I now take my application and I break it up into multiple tiers. So I might have a group that's called Web, might have a group that's called App, and a group that's called Database. Once again, I'm pulling all of these out of the same subnet. I don't have to change the IP addressing. I don't have to change the VLAN information. I say OK, I say submit, and then I can simply define contracts, for instance, between web and app that allow only the web servers to talk to the app servers. And I could lock down those ports if I want to. And then I can define another contract that's called app to DB that only allows my application servers to talk to my database servers. So as you can see, it's very easy to create these application policies. You do have to know the dependencies of your application, because based on the whitelist fabric, this is basically like sticking a firewall between each layer of your application, or similar to putting your application out in a DMZ and putting a firewall between it. But if you do know the dependencies, or you don't want to be as granular, it's very easy to create these tiered policies around your application servers. And you still get some level of security there, because now the web servers are only allowed to talk to the app servers, and the app servers are only allowed to talk to the database servers, where before, in your traditional network, web could probably talk to both app and database servers based on the routing table. The other thing I wanted to show you really quick is that ACI actually integrates with your virtualization platform. So if I want to push my web group down to my virtualization platform, such as vCenter, I can simply grab this VMware bubble, drag it over to the web group. I then choose the vCenter I want to push this configuration to by adding an association. I choose the vCenter, I press submit, and now APIC actually integrates with vCenter. It configures the port group, and it makes it available in your ESX server, so that all your server admin has to do is actually pick the web port group and put the server into that group, and now it gets all the quality of service, it gets all the security, it gets all the routing and switching that it's supposed to have on the network for the web servers with much less configuration. You do have to configure that integration. You have to specify the vCenter that you want to integrate with. You have to have the passwords to integrate with it, but it's very easy to set up. And once you set that up, it makes your life a lot easier. Please join me for the next lesson, 9.8, Managing Third-Party Devices with ACI Policy.